In this video, I'm going to go over my top 6 tips for wild camping solo here in the UK. Let's go. Hello, Russ here, bringing you the best tips and inspiration for hiking around the world. If all of that sounds right up your street, then do consider hitting that subscribe button below for more content just like this every single week. I've learned a lot about wild camping over the years. I started hiking way back in 2016, and yeah, I've done videos about this before, but I just keep learning, keep picking up new things. So these tips are definitely going to help you have a safe and enjoyable and respectful time in the wilderness while you're wild camping here in the UK. For more information on all of the legalities of wild camping here in the UK, I've got a video up here in this link that goes over all of the aspects about the law with regards to wild camping here in this country. So do check that out. It goes way more in depth about the law and where you can actually wild camp here. Okay, so without further ado, let's get on with the tips. So tip number 1, and that is to only camp where it's permitted or tolerated. In Scotland, it is completely legal to wild camp anywhere except Loch Lomond and the Trossachs National Park, where you'll need permits in some areas between March and September. In the Lake District National Park, it is tolerated with bylaws, but you're only allowed to camp for a certain number of nights in a small group of people between 2 and 3, and it has to be above the highest fell wall and on open access land. In Dartmoor National Park, I'll actually put a link to this below in the description. There is a website that actually shows you all of the places where you're legally allowed to wild camp in the purple areas. Those places you can pitch your tent wherever you like. Dartmoor National Park is all common land, so you're allowed to use that for wild camping however you wish, but there is again a restriction on the amount of nights that you can stay there. I think it's like 2 or 3, and again small groups of people only, and you have to abide by all of the leave no trace principles. In other national parks like Snowdonia, the Brecon Beacons, in the Peak District, it is actually not promoted that you should wild camp there. However, the culture around it that I've experienced is a bit similar with the Lake District. So long as you're on open access land, you're above the highest fell wall, and you're not on anyone's farmland, usually it's tolerated. But the difference with that is there are no bylaws like with the Lake District and with Dartmoor that allow you to wild camp in those spaces. So it's much more illegal in all of the other national parks, but the locals and the councils, they tend to tolerate it a lot more. By tolerated, what I mean is local bylaws differ, and that also depends on which part of the land in the national parks. So it's worth checking online before you go wild camping in these places, just to make sure that it is tolerated. The different bylaws basically tell you how long you can stay there, where you can stay, how many people in a group, etc. But yeah, like I said, do a Google. So tip number 2, and that is to use a tent that is small, lightweight and easy to set up. Smaller tents have a much smaller footprint, meaning that they will have a much lower impact on wild spaces. Also, a smaller tent allows you to have more campsite options. They're also a lot easier and faster to set up, meaning that when you do so, it's a lot more discreet. A really cheap small tent that I've used is the OEX Phoxx one. It was a fantastic little tent. It used 2 aluminium poles. It wasn't the lightest, but it cost me about 50 quid from Go Outdoors. They also have a 2-person version called the Phoxx 2. Wicked little tents. They're really good in a windstorm, and they'll keep you safe. And they also, like I said, have a small footprint, and you'll have a lot more camping options. Tip number 3, and that is to set up camp just before dark and to pack everything away just before or during sunrise. The benefits of doing it at these times is that it is much more discreet, and there's just enough light for you to see what you're doing without using a bright headlamp. So again, being discreet is important, but also you're not kind of disturbing anyone in the area. You're not disturbing other hikers, you're not disturbing any other walkers. At these times there's a lot less people on the trails, so yeah, those times are a really good time to set up and break down camp. Tip number 4, and that is to hike solo or with 2 other people max. One of the benefits of hiking in small groups or just on your own is that it's more discreet, and also if you're hiking in really big groups of people, if you all want to camp together, you have a lot less options of campsites. You have to find somewhere a lot bigger to fit 3 or 4, maybe 5 tents in. So if it's just 2 of you, share a tent. If it's 3 people, you've got 2 tents. Possibly 4 people, then you can share 2 tents. But yeah, the less people the better. Other benefits are that it's much faster when you're setting up and breaking down camp, and also you make a lot less noise. There is a lot less footfall, the less people that are in the group, so that also helps with the wild spaces and preserving those. But also if you're hiking on your own, it allows you to enjoy the solitude, enjoy nature for what it is, really soak it all up. You're not busy in conversation, you're not distracted by anybody else. I prefer wild camping on my own most of the time. It of course is really great to share the experience with friends, but the less people that you have in a group, the better. Tip number 5, and that is to not light any campfires. So the problems with campfires is that they're messy, smoky, they give off light pollution, they're really difficult to clean up. Another real big problem is a lot of the land that's in the national parks has a layer of peat underneath it, which is flammable. If you set fire to that, you'll have a real big problem on your hands with some kind of wildfire. While I was up in Scotland last year, I saw a huge wildfire on the hills and it just destroyed everything. There were fire engines, people coming out of their houses to see what was going on. It was terrible. The whole of the landscape was completely torched, and you just know that the likelihood of it was that someone was blatantly having a wild camp, setting up a fire, and it just got out of control. So yeah, not lighting fires is really important, especially here in the UK, unless it's in a designated campfire pit. The only time that you should ever really light a fire is if you're in a survival situation, it's in the winter, and you're at risk of hypothermia and you need to keep warm and you don't have enough gear on you. That would be the only time that I'd say it's acceptable to light any kind of a campfire. You just don't need it, especially in the shoulder seasons and in the summer. There's just no need for a campfire. If you have all of the right equipment, the layering system, you have the right sleeping bag, you have the right tent. A stove is all you're ever going to need for boiling water, heating up your food. It's much cleaner, it's safer, it's more efficient. So yeah, a stove is all you're ever going to need. And last but not least, tip number 6, and that is to leave no trace. I've got a video up here in this link that basically goes over all of the leave no trace principles and my top 5 tips on how to keep the wilderness clean. So do go check that out, it's definitely worth a watch. But definitely for tip number 6, for leave no trace, just make sure that you pack out everything that you took with you. Bury human waste at least 100 feet from the trail, water sources or other campsites. Pack out all of your used toilet roll, don't bury it. Bring minimal single-use plastic, and make sure that you portion out all of your food like noodles or anything like that into Ziploc bags, wash and reuse them, buy things in bulk. Just make sure you don't bring too many single-use plastics with you, and also don't disturb any vegetation or wildlife while you're out there. The leave no trace principles go over all of this in a lot more detail, but I just thought it was definitely a good point to have in this video. What strategies, tips or hacks do you have with regards to wild camping here in the UK? Do let us know below in the comments section. The trail hunter community would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching this tips video on wild camping here in the UK. Thumbs if you liked it, subs if you loved it, and I'll see you in the next one.